Pre-Raphaelites were inspired by the ideas of John Ruskin, who was a pretty good amateur artist himself, as you can see in these works, but an even more influential writer about art. One of his influential ideas adopted by the Pre-Raphaelites was the return to the spiritual values of the medieval and Gothic periods. His other key idea was that artists should return to faithfully depicting nature in all its glory and detail. Now these ideas are somewhat general, and the Pre-Raphaelites used this as a starting point and over time developed their ideas, and often not in a single direction. This makes it sometimes hard to decide which artists and works truly express the Pre-Raphaelite ideas and which ones are only inspired partly by their ideas. The early leader of the Pre-Raphaelites was John Everett Millais, but after a few years he became more a realist painter who abandoned some of the ideas of the medieval spirit. Last week's video focused on the first 5 years of the Brotherhood, and in this video the focus is on the next phase, when some of the Pre-Raphaelites started to focus on contemporary societal themes, and others further developed the quest for realism and their pursuance of the truth of nature. In the first 5 years, as discussed in last week's video, the Pre-Raphaelite works had a bit of an old-fashioned feel to them, as they were inspired by and resembled some of the 15th century compositions. Look for example at this work from 1851 by Charles Alston Collins on the left, compared to a work by Piero della Francesca from around 1450. Both show a religious scene set in nature, and both paintings have the arched top. The main difference is obviously the luminosity of nature, which was inspired by Ruskin's ideas to paint nature truthfully and do that outside instead of in the studio. Another example is this painting from 1850, again by Charles Alston Collins, which reminds us more of a simplistic 15th century painting than a sophisticated 19th century painting. But from around 1853 onwards, some Pre-Raphaelites started to care more about contemporary subjects like poverty and inequality, as well as other social taboos and moral issues. It did not necessarily mean that they immediately painted people from their own time. Millais, for example, started to paint some historical scenes about topics that would apply to the Victorian society of the day, like this painting entitled The Order of Release in 1746, which he painted in 1853. It's a scene of the Jacobite rebellion in the 18th century, and the moral message is that a revolution is a futile thing, while one's family is very important. At the same time, Millais painted another such work entitled The Proscribed Royalist, 1651, showing a woman hiding a royalist in a hollow tree after the royalists had lost an important battle. It were these types of more socially relevant paintings that would actually bring the Pre-Raphaelites broader recognition and positive critiques. A painting inspired by Millais' The Proscribed Royalist is The Wounded Cavalier from 1856 by William Shakespeare Burton, which shows a Puritan with a large Bible in his hand. He does not show interest in the wounded cavalier, as he does not follow the same religion, illustrated by the sinful playing cards at his feet. But the Puritan's sister at least shows compassion for the wounded man. It's the moral trade-off between religious differences and caring for people regardless of their background that is at the center here. Once again, it was the influence of John Ruskin which helped the Pre-Raphaelites get more recognition. Ruskin promoted the idea that poetry and painting were both great and complementary ways to create awareness for social concerns and to improve the life of the ordinary man. And as poetry was considered to be a nobler art form than painting, by associating these two with each other, it raised the status of painting. The Pre-Raphaelites not only were inspired by poetry, they also published poems together with their paintings to provide even more context and status to their work. The best proponent of this idea was Dante Gabriel Rossetti. Let's look at a few more representative examples where we can see the moral issues the Pre-Raphaelites painted, like this work by Robert Braithwaite Martineau, showing the man on the right who has gambled away his family fortune. And while they have to sell their possessions and leave their house, the man does not seem to bother about the impact of his actions on his family, as he is just enjoying a glass of champagne. And as we will discuss in a little bit, notice the incredible attention to detail in this painting, following the Pre-Raphaelite idea for realism and truth to nature. Another great example of a work that reflected on society was The Awakening Conscious, painted in 1853 by William Holman Hunt. It shows a scene of a married man with his mistress. The unmarried mistress has suddenly got up from his lap, realizing in what a miserable situation she has gotten herself. The meaning of this painting may not be immediately clear to most of us, but it would be relatively clear to someone in mid-19th century England, as there are a lot of symbolic clues that support this story, like the cat at the bottom left who has caught a bird. But the general idea is that she is stuck in a cluttered room with a man who has his own family and a future, while in the mirror we can see where the woman is watching. A beautiful world full of light, a happy world that is far away for her. The final example of these moral messages is a painting entitled Stages of Cruelty, a work on which Ford Madox Brown worked for 34 years. It shows how a girl is hitting an innocent dog with a small flowering branch, and how the male in the bushes makes advances to the lady, who in turn completely ignores him. And each flower adds meaning to the painting. The girl is holding Love Lies Bleeding, symbolizing hopelessness. The man is hiding in a lilac bush, a symbol for first love. And the bindweed that the woman is holding stands for extinguishing hopes. So it were these types of themes by the Pre-Raphaelites that made their work much more relevant and led to a much broader acceptance and appreciation of their works. In the meanwhile, the search for a truthful depiction of nature and realism continued. William Holman Hunt took the search for realism to the next level. In 1852, he had completed this painting entitled The Light of the World, but he received severe criticism about the lack of realism in this painting. Realizing that it could indeed not be very realistic to paint Jesus in a British setting, he decided to travel to current-day Israel and search for the precise locations where a biblical story would have taken place, and use that to create a much more realistic version of the scene he painted, like he did in this painting entitled The Finding of the Savior in the Temple. John Everett Millay also went to great efforts to paint this work entitled The Rescue in 1855. It was based on an event he had witnessed earlier that year, showing a fireman rescuing 3 kids out of a burning house. And to paint a burning house as accurately as possible, Millay would travel all over London to witness many fires and their impact, such that he had a good idea how smoke interacted with light, or how a burning plank would look like. Now Millay started to focus almost exclusively on the realism of his works, which we would actually consider more part of the realism art movement, as he abandoned the Pre-Raphaelite interest in a medieval spirit. In 1853, Millay had become an associate member of the Royal Academy, as he believed that innovation had to take place within the Academy. And while he was the early leader of the Pre-Raphaelites, people now started to look at him as someone who abandoned the Pre-Raphaelite ideas. That is not to say that he was not successful, as Millay would become one of the, if not the most successful British artists of the second half of the 19th century. A good example of Millay's work in this period is the Veil of Rest, showing 2 nuns digging a grave. Millay still paid great attention to painting nature and people, but the bright colors of his earlier works are replaced by more somber colors, reflecting the content of the painting. And it shows a contemporary scene from 1858 rather than one based on some historical story or literature. But for the Pre-Raphaelites, the quest for realism and the truth of nature remained at the core of their artistic ideas during the middle of the 1850s. There were even some Pre-Raphaelites who purely focused on capturing the landscape as detailed as possible, including the likes of John William Inchbald and John Brett, whose work Val d'Aosta from 1858 you can see here. Well, I'm leaving it at this for this video. Next week, we'll look at the third phase of the Pre-Raphaelites when Dante Gabriel Rossetti was their true leader and when the focus shifted from naturalism to symbolism. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that thumbs up button, subscribe, hit that notification bell and leave a comment down below with your thoughts. Thanks for watching.